Hi Sagittarius, welcome to your November 2019 Astro Update. It's Raina here, and as a fellow Sagittarian, I feel like when I do the forecast for Sag that I'm really taking it in because it's going to be affecting me. Now my sun is in Sagittarius, but my rising sign is Taurus, and this is where it becomes interesting because if you know what your rising sign is, you can always listen to that forecast. Remember that all of these forecasts that I do are going to be very general because the degree of sun or rising is important in determining exactly where these transits are going to occur. But even with the generalized thing, I do feel that it is helpful in getting a feel for what the themes are, even if it doesn't happen in the exact same time frame that I'm talking about. And an example of that will be when we have a new moon in Sagittarius. It's only going to be at 4 degrees. So for many Sages, this is actually going to fall in your 12th house. And that is something that means that the real feeling of kind of moving ahead in your life and, what we associate with the solar return is going to be more likely at the solar eclipse in December in Capricorn, because that will also be at 4 degrees, and that will be in the first house of the majority of Sages, either sun or rising, depending on your whatever you're listening for. So but eventually it will come, and so even if you listen for this, it can get you pumped for next month. And for most of us who have beyond the 4 degree mark in sun or rising Sag, that's going to be an even bigger new beginning because it's happening as a solar eclipse. So it's much more powerful, significant, what have you. And of course, in 2020, the eclipses are going to go into Sag and Gemini. And I said, of course, like everybody knows this. I'm sorry about that. Okay. And by the way, not for Gemini, probably until the end of the year, I'm assuming. I haven't even looked towards the end of 2020, but I know there's going to be a lunar eclipse in Sagittarius next June. So, as the month of November begins, Mercury has just gone retrograde. Now for Sag, it's gone retrograde in Scorpio, and that's the 12th house. That is a very interesting house. It's the last house of the zodiac. It's the house that Pisces and its ruler, Neptune, rules. So the energy of the 12th house is very, you could say it's murky, it's dreamy. It's a house of dreams. It's a house of past lives. So it's otherworldly, it's not practical, and our minds are there, and it's also retrograding in that house. So there can be, I would say, a lot of introspection that occurs. But it can be introspection that's not just about, what do I want to do with my life? But kind of almost to me like the 8th house, where it's kind of excavating a lot of stuff that you have suppressed, maybe memories that, this is the house of sublimated memories and, like the subconscious and the unconscious mind. So the memories that come up may be triggered by seemingly random things. I don't know about Mercury retrograde, but when I have Mercury in the 12th house, it can get really weird. I can just be walking down the street, and if I see something, I flash on a memory, a buried memory. and the accompanying emotion that comes with that memory. It's kind of cool and kind of freaky at the same time. You may be like on, if you want to call it more practical level, but a type of spiritual practice you may come back to, or rethinking your spiritual journey in some way, because the 12th house, actually, come to think of it, this is probably the best use of this is probably like getting a past life regression, because, talk about going back into something that you could be going back centuries. I've never had one of those. And the reason is because I figure if I'm not remembering something, there's a good reason for it. I've already got enough emotional baggage in this lifetime. Why should I add to it? That's and I'm a very curious person, but I'm just trying to make it through another day with what I'm dealing with right now. And to me, I know that it can be very healing. It's just something that doesn't really appeal to me. But for some of you, you might really feel that this is something that is important for you. And this is the time that you really feel called to do it, because the sun is also in this sector. The sun is in the 12th house. This is hibernation time. I'm recording this on October 15th. And on October 22nd, I believe it is, or is it the 23rd? I don't have that in front of me, but the sun is going to go into Scorpio. And that's when the sun is in Sagittarius' 12th house. And it can be a great time for, touching upon the things that you need to deal with if you feel called to do so. The 23rd, yes. But, for some people, they're not ready for that. And so if you feel like kind of anxious when you have Mercury retrograde in the 12th house, the best thing to do is meditation, because that is the intention for meditation, is stopping thought. Not that you can, but to redirect it and to be more mindful of, the kind of things that you're thinking. Because Mercury in the 12th house can get your mind into vague anxieties if you don't, if you're not careful. But then I thought to myself, oh, wow, I wonder if people are going to think this is too negative. But, this too shall pass. Mercury isn't going to be here all that long. But the point too is that sometimes it's so nice to know that there are astrological influences that could be affecting your life when it seems like things just start to switch off. And you're like, why? It's like somebody turned the off switch on, in my life. And why is that? And you could see some of the transits maybe affecting that. And it can give you that sense of kind of like a calm feeling that life isn't just random and chaotic. And that can actually make you let go of resistance, which often happens when we feel that our life is out of control. We kind of become very retentive, and that's when people clench their jaw when they're anxious or what have you, that is retaining that energy, that negative energy, and so you can just let go, and that to me can make manifestation so much easier. So it has like a multi-dimensional positive result. So the sun will be in this house until the 23rd. Okay, so I'm doing November. I'm sorry. I was talking about October when the sun goes into Scorpio. The sun goes into Sag on November 22nd. So it is the 22nd of November. But it's in the 12th for the first 3 weeks. So making best use of that is having a lot of alone time, a lot of downtime, really tuning into yourself spiritually about what it is that you want to accomplish in your life that is not of a material nature. Even you can even have spiritual goals. And I want to meditate every day. This is coming from also the new moon in Scorpio. You can do that then as well, which is on October 27th, because that will be in your 12th house. And I know the reason I'm mentioning October transits, I know a lot of people are listening then. And so it's just a time of reflection, very quiet. You might not feel like you have the same amount of energy. You might feel, especially in the northern hemisphere where it's getting darker, and in United States we have the daylight savings time, and it's just we fall back. We push the clock back an hour in November, and that's when it really feels like whoa. On the first of the month, though, Venus goes into our sign, to Sag. And that, you could call that a saving grace in a lot of ways, because it gives us an aura that is very inviting to other people. And this can benefit Sag in many different ways. It can be great for single Sagittarians who want to meet somebody. Venus is associated with beauty, but I also believe that charisma is a big factor in success romantically, where people who some people are magnets to others. And it's kind of like, we're not talking about it from that very cut and dried perspective. We're talking about that special something, and you can't put your finger on it sometimes, that people have. Sometimes it has nothing to do with the actual good looks of somebody. And Venus is the attractor, so whatever is going on for you in these first 3 weeks of the month, you may attract a lot of good stuff to you. And I was mentioning with another sign that I guess it was Scorpio, because that's the only other sign I've done, that I take the first house as being not only the body and the persona, but also kind of like a catch-all house for a whole new cycle. And that being said, that it can affect all areas of life. So when you have Venus or Jupiter in the first house, there's like a general positive kind of like a influence, and that may mean that good things are coming your way because other people they like you and they want to help you, if that's what you need from them. Or if you're promoting yourself, if you have your own business and you feel like you have to really hustle to get people, new clients or what have you, maybe it'll come easier. That people, they might not even know why they're doing it, but they said sometimes that'll happen where somebody will say, I just felt like you were the person that I wanted to do this or that for me. So generally speaking, I would say that this could be good luck for Sagittarius to have Venus in the first house. And on the and you could even be getting your hair cut or something where you're beautifying yourself. So something like doing a makeover or something. On the 12th, there's a full moon at 19 degrees of Taurus, and that's in the 6th house of health and work for Sag. So full moons can bring things to light. You can maybe, if you've been plugging away at a job and you have a full moon here, you're like, wow, gee, I don't know if I want to still work here. Like you have second thoughts about where you're working, what you're doing. It could feel like maybe you realize you're not in the right place. It could bring to light a coworker's covert activities. It can be the end of a job that you're doing. Now, maybe you do contract work and you're not working with one company steadily. That could be the end of that around the 12th of the month. Or you could get a promotion, something, almost like completely opposite that, where, the full moon brings things to like culmination. So if you've been working hard to kind of progress in your work, you might actually get there. On the 19th, we have Mars going into that 12th house. Now, this tells a different story now that I'm putting the pieces together, because if Mars is in the 11th house, although not necessarily, Mars is very feisty, but it can be very prickly and ornery. So it's possible that Mars in the 11th house, which is what I was hinting at, is not all that warm and fuzzy. Mars is sometimes about conflict. When it's in the 11th house, you may be, not that you're necessarily picking fights with your friends, but you may be reacting more to them than normal. Maybe you don't feel like you see eye to eye with some of the people that you normally hang out with for some reason. And because you have these planets in the 12th house, the Sun and Mercury, it's possible that you are feeling this divine connection and you feel like you don't need this, or you're having that spiritual experience that is making you see how these relationships are falling so far short of the mark, and that you really don't like how it's going, you don't like how your friendships are going. You can see that they're no longer working for you. And, I didn't mention this about the Sun and Mercury being in the 12th house, but it's possible that some Sagittarians will even be in a place where they can have that alone time. So for instance, the word monastery was coming into my head, but obviously I'm not talking about joining a monastery. I'm talking about more of a retreat center, but not anything that's like a spa, like where you're really alone. It may be very Spartan quarters, and you're just doing that in order to stay very focused on the task at hand, which is kind of connecting with your higher self. I always pronounce this wrong. Vipassana, I don't know how to say Vipassana meditation, that 10-day meditation course. That, I think it's Vipassana. Or maybe there's no S, Vipassana or something. I think a lot of you know what I'm talking about. And they have these centers, at least I know they have them in the United States, throughout in different states. But, you don't even have to pay money. You can give a donation afterwards. 10 days of really just sitting and, sitting with yourself in a very minimalistic way. And I have been tempted to do one of these. That would be a real challenge for me based on, my own patterns. But who knows, maybe that's the very best person to do one of these. So you might be on a meditation retreat or something where this is just really resonating with you, this idea of being alone and in the silence. And with Mars leaving that social sector on the 19th and going into that 12th house as well, you know, it can be this situation where, ironically, you know, Mars in the 12th house may make you feel a little bit more antsy, spiritually, where you feel like you have this energy that you cannot discharge. So Hatha yoga is good for that because it's physical, but it also calms the different chakra centers. Some which may be overactive and therefore, or even underactive, and therefore creating that imbalance, which can lead to a lot of other problems. So, you know, just continuing down the line here, the next day on the 20th, Mercury goes direct. So Mercury finally goes direct. Now, remember that Mercury in the 12th house, it may not affect your day-to-day life. So this may be one of those Mercury retrogrades where you're like, you know, I forgot that we were having a Mercury retrograde, where everybody else, all hell's breaking loose, and you're just sitting there because it's been kind of a very quiet place for it to occur. And it might have been a much more subtle influence. On the 22nd, we, as a collective in Sag, experience our solar return. Your true solar return is on your birthday, but look to the ephemeris, because sometimes, depending on what year it is, on your birthday, it may not be the exact degree of your sun sign or your rising sign. So it might be a day before, a day after, something like that. So you have to see exactly when your solar return is. It's kind of cool, though, if you celebrate your birthday and then your solar return is the next day. It's like having 2 birthdays in a row. And when the sun crosses over your first house, into your first house, that to me is a sign of new beginnings. Regardless if you haven't set any intentions for the coming year or not, which I think is always a great use of the birthday, is to set intentions. But, you know, some people don't feel called to do so. But I don't know, I think it's just a wonderful time. And you might find that your energy returns and things like that. And then on the 25th, Venus goes into Capricorn. That's the second house of earned income. I like that because Venus rules this house. This can indicate that money is coming into our lives more than has been the case. Oh, I just noticed this is exactly a month before that solar eclipse in that second house. So that could set the stage for a really good financial ending to 2019. How many Sages have felt disappointed by Jupiter in Sag transit, and they were expecting, oh man, I'm going to get this, I'm going to get that, and it's like a big nothing burger. And I say that facetiously because we should be, there's probably something in the past year to be grateful for, even financially, if you've been able to pay your bills, if you've been able to, do some things that you enjoy. That's something to celebrate, and just to feel that you have a blessed life. But this is nice. I like seeing that Venus is in the second house, money, mojo, and the very next day we have that new moon in Sagittarius. Are those two events somehow related? That would be an interesting thing to ponder. 4 degrees of Sag. First house, for those of you who are born, probably between the 22nd, possibly 21st or 22nd of November to about the 26th or so. That will be in your first house and the rest in the 12th. Even if it's in your first house, this is just a new, start of your new solar cycle. If it's in your 12th house, this can be some kind of new spiritual endeavor that you're engaged in, and that's good too, because what happens is that when you have the new moon in Capricorn next month, on Christmas, for North Americans, maybe the East Coast and other countries, not other countries, maybe the East Coast should be its own country, but the East Coast and European and other continents, they're probably having it on the 26th. But so that can indicate that so that's the vast majority of Sages. That can be the time when you look to for the full Monty, the full feeling of new beginnings in, that new cycle for you. But you can prepare. This is the 12th house is kind of the womb. You can prepare for that debut by doing spiritual practices. And the whole idea of the spiritual practices isn't to be good to get brownie points for God to see and approve of, but so that you can put life in its proper context. I think that's the real purpose of all of this, is to put life in its proper context. And then on the 27th, we have a Neptune going direct in the 4th house of home and family, Pisces, the sign that rules. I mean, the sign that is ruled by Neptune. Neptune is in its own sign, and for Sag, this is the 4th house of home and family. When Neptune went retrograde, which I believe was back in June, but don't quote me on that. This was probably a very hard situation for some Sages who have had maybe problems with your mother, because, come to think of it, because Neptune is so slow moving, perhaps even in the shadow period before the actual retrograde, you experience the effects of this. This is like having the illusion stripped away about something. So if this has to do with your mother, if this has to do with your childhood, this could have been quite, devastating might be too strong a word, but definitely disillusioning. Because Neptune is about illusion. And that's actually the perfect word for Neptune retrograde, where it could create that disillusionment, because it takes away all of those ideas that you had, maybe about your childhood, about how happy it was. And then you realize, wow, I had a lot of sorrow that, maybe I didn't know how to process. But it's here. It's still here all these years later. And it's still waiting for me to acknowledge it. And boy, this is going to be a tough one. Now, Mercury is direct in that 12th house. So Mercury going direct can make, even in the 12th house, can make things a little bit more, I would say, straightforward and, progressive, where 12th house can even be kind of like the past. Not only talk about the past lives are the past. And Sagittarius is a fire sign, and fire signs tend to love the future, love to think ahead, and fantasize about the future. So having, Mercury stuck in the 12th house may not be that easy to do that. But at the very least, Mercury direct can keep your thoughts focusing on the here and now rather than going back. And whatever has occurred in the last several months with Neptune in the 4th house, and this could also involve a property that you may have bought and you kind of regret it. Maybe you have buyer's remorse, or you just don't like it anymore. At one time it may have been your dream home, and now it just has these memories that you just would rather distance yourself from. I think that now you have a better opportunity to deal with whatever this represents in your life in a way that is not only realistic, maybe it was more realistic when Neptune was retrograde, but at least it will be more idealistic, but that can be good, because when things are stripped bare, it can be too much to bear, pardon the pun. Okay, so this may be actually better for you to move forward in your life without having to constantly feel that emotion, because it's definitely of the emotional variety, being in Pisces. Okay, that's what I have for you, Sag. I hope that some of this is in alignment with what is already going on in your life, that you see some of these patterns. I would love to read for you if you are interested. The information for my online store is available below this video. And I wish you a wonderful November. Take care. Bye.